Hi, I'm J.M. Frey, and we are reading the Skylark song. Today, chapter 17. The revelation hung over Robin's head until they were seated at the chess table in the salon after dinner. Courting me, she thought. He's actually truly courting me. Trust me, he'd said, repeatedly. My dear, he'd called her. He'd listened when she'd begged him to let Al have a proper funeral. Granted, he'd done so by simply leaving his corpse to be found and taken a beating from his general over it. He hadn't gone back out into the sky since she'd come here, as far as she knew, and in all the times that they had danced behind their windscreens, all the times he'd had the opportunity to shoot her down. He hadn't. Oh, stupid Robin, she thought, chastising herself. How blind you've been, Captain Arianhod. But then, how could she have ever predicted something as far-fetched as her arch-nemesis being romantic? How could she have anticipated that his intentions were true, that they were not just part of an elaborate scheme she had yet to suss out? It was ridiculous. Their eyes had met over the wing of Wade's glider, and what? That was it? That was love at first sight for him? Robin continued to scold herself even as she laid out the pieces on the board. He placed the white queen before her, fingers lingering on the ivory crown as he looked up at her from under his lashes, inviting her to play the first piece, like a gentleman. Her stomach swooped upward, like the feeling of doing a barrel roll. Robin was startled by the surge of affection that pressed against the root of her tongue. By all the gods of the hearth, she thought desperately. This is dangerous. I can't let this happen. I have to get out of here. Chess was the only place where Robin was his equal in this whole production of a noble romance. Everywhere else the power imbalance was pronounced. Robin followed orders, did as she was told, wore and ate what she was given. But at the chessboard, the Coyote didn't tell her how to play or what to move. He just told her the rules and let her find the pitfalls herself. That night, she captured his king for the first time. He gave her a glorious, honest smile and an effusive, "Very well done, my dear." He surged up from his chair when she declared checkmate, and for a frightening, disconnected moment, Robin had thought he was going to strike her. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her shoulders, tugged her up out of her seat, and hugged her. He was elated. The softness of his shirt, the faint scent of apples and wine, the gentle body heat, these things she remembered from when he'd carried her to her room. What she didn't remember was how safe the shelter of his arms made her feel. That was new, wasn't it? Even if it wasn't, it was such a strange thing to think about the scourge of the skies. It was terrifying and wonderful. And for just a few minutes, starved for affection and kind human touch in this terrible place, Robin let herself sink into it. She laid her cheek against his shoulder, closed her eyes, and tentatively relaxed into his touch. The Coyote sucked in a startled breath, one hand sliding up her spine to cradle the back of her head. She still kept her strange hair off her face and pinned back at all times, and he dug his long fingers into the base of her bun. It felt good, loosening the tight pull, and Robin shivered and let him tilt her face up to his. Careful, careful, she scolded herself. What are you doing? Why are you... Hit him! Push him away! He's the bad guy, for God's sakes! But his hands were gentle, and the soft spark of hope in his gaze was like a magnet. And if he was honest, if his feelings were genuine, if he really, truly was a captive like her... Why was this so hard to figure out? Why can't I get this straight? It should be so easy to... Skylark, he murmured, and there was a puff of hot breath against her mouth. He was curling down, his other hand coming up to frame her chin, and... Al... She pushed him away. Not hard, but with enough force that he stumbled back a step, clattering into the chess table. The remaining upright pieces skittered and rolled around when they tipped over. That's... Robin started, but then didn't know how to go on, so she just let the word die in the air between them. No. No. the Coyote echoed, and in an instant the mask he always wore when they were in rooms where they could be observed returned. The look of devastation she'd seen splash across his face shuddered behind a wall of feigned indifference. This isn't... You don't really... She turned away from him, ran her hands through her hair, dislodging the pins and ribbons that held it back. Her face was hot. Gods, why was her face flushed? Why was she breathing so hard? And why was something in her stomach twisting and dancing like bees on a honeycomb? Of course The Coyote started, reaching for her again, grasping her elbow before Robin yanked herself back a few paces more. You don't, she insisted. You can't. Because I am the enemy, he asked, voice level, cool, as he drew himself up, affronted. Because you're holding me prisoner, Robin snarled. The Coyote's jaw dropped open, shock playing across his face, and gods, she almost wished that he was wearing that ridiculous helmet. That way she wouldn't have to see the way he stared at her, the way his expression crumpled, and his eyes shone just a tad too brightly, and the way he looked like it was actually real. For just a moment. Skylark, we are both. So you say, she shouted. Please, he said, hand out as he stepped forward, eyes darting towards the closed door in the hall. A little quieter, please, he pleaded, or the seneschal will come inside, and then we will never what? Robin challenged. Go on. Tell me how this farce of a romance plays out in your head. I'd really love to know what lines I'm supposed to be memorizing. Skylark, he chided miserably. She could see him fighting for control, fighting to keep the mask in place. Are you saying that you feel nothing? Robin opened her mouth to answer, but only a small, hesitant sound escaped the sudden squeeze of her lungs. God damn it! So you do, the Coyote said, hope glinting in his eyes before she could get her voice to work properly again. It's not about feeling nothing, Robin sputtered. It's about what's happening right here, now, and how this is not right. But if we were elsewhere, he began, in that gravelly huskiness he always used to rattle her senses. He was just so persistent. If this imbalance was not present, if we were simply... You and I will never be simply anything. The Coyote snarled and turned away from her. At first she thought it was a dramatic huff. He set his hands on the chess table, braced himself against it, arms rigid and shoulders locked. But then his shoulders started to shake. Was he laughing? How dare he laugh at her here, now, when they... He picked up a pawn and rolled it between his palms thoughtfully. His laughter, tense, bitter, angry-sounding, abated. When I first laid eyes on you, Skylark, you must understand, he said slowly, low, voice wavering somewhere between genuine emotion and the cool drawl of his performance persona. He set the pawn back on the board and turned to her. When I first saw you, I was ashamed. What? Robin asked, not expecting this turn of conversation. Why? Do you not know the picture you made, literally out on a wing, and unafraid? He said with a rueful, self-depreciating smirk, his eyes on hers. The bruise over his left one had faded away, leaving him still narrow-faced but closer to handsome than before. And there I was, sitting safe in my airship, scavenging, as your people accused me of, too cowardly to do what was right, instead of what my king commanded. I saw so much of myself in you as well. Here is one, I told myself, who is skilled and valued for that skill, and for nothing else. They sent you up after me time and time again, and you bested me. That caught my attention, yes, but your determination, and Asili as well. I thought, she is like me. She is there because they order her to be. I could have left, Robin said, any time I wanted. From the day I turned 17, I could have left. To do what? The Coyote asked, crossing his arms over his chest and leaning back against the edge of the table. To be a wife, a mother. when what you really want is the sky? Robin jumped a bit, startled that he had so perfectly gleaned her own thoughts on the matter from their idle conversations in the workshop. Oh, do not be so surprised, my dear. I listen when you speak. I understand the call of the world above the war. I tried to balance my orders with my desire to harm no one, and in the end, all I could do was what I was told. Soldiers follow orders, Robin said softly. It's our job. You can't beat yourself up over, but ought we follow the orders we know are wrong, the Coyote interrupted, voice hushed, pitched to be below the threshold of hearing to those more than a few paces from him. How many deaths, Skylark, before it becomes not just war, but a terrible crime, a genocide? How much blood can one man bathe in and still come out clean? He dropped his eyes to the board again and flicked the fallen king with one long finger, glaring at it suddenly. Why will he not listen to me? Who? The Coyote brought his gaze back to Robin's. The king. Why would the king listen to you? Because we are family, he said flatly, and pushed off the table. He moved around to his customary seat and began to reset the board. Come, let us play another game. What sort of family? Robin asked, intrigued. She took a few cautious steps towards her own seat. Enough that he ought to listen to me. No more now. I do not wish to speak of him. The glance he sent up at her was shuttered, but she thought she could see pain crinkled in the corners of his eyes, his mouth. Your move. All right, Robin said, settling into her chair and moving her pawn. Pawns, she thought, going where they're told, doing what they're told to, commanded by a cowardly king who only moves one square at a time. Before she set it down, she ran her thumbnail across the little piece's stylized helmet. And what does this fellow want out of his nightly war? A warm bed, a safe house, a little chess-piece family with the bishop's daughter? Is there a place for romance in the ranks of war? She looked up at the Coyote, who met her gaze steadily, gray eyes warm with something Robin felt more and more certain was actually honest. Something that, if she were honest too, she might just want in return. Something she couldn't let herself want. This trap's becoming too tempting, she scolded herself, before decisively clacking the pawn down into the square of her opening move. So why not use the bait that's already inside it to get yourself out? As the Coyote contemplated his own first play, Robin screwed up her courage and said, Want to sweeten the pot? He sat back and steepled his fingers under his chin, thoughtful. What a curious idiom. I want to make a bargain, Robin clarified. I know what you meant, my dear, he smiled, looking a little lighter, a little freer. What terms do you propose? If I win, you show me where we are on a map. The Coyote's face went carefully blank, and Robin bit the inside of her cheek, hoping her own face was equally unreadable. Had she tipped her hand? No, he said. It was too late to back down now. She had to keep on. Sitting around waiting for some happy accident that would lead to her escape wasn't working. All the luck she'd had in the sky seemed to have abandoned her on the ground. It was time to be proactive, to chase her freedom instead of letting it come to her. If she didn't, it might not come at all. Robin sat back and crossed her arms over her chest. I have no reason to play if I can't get something out of it, she said. Then she stood and walked away from the table toward the hearth. Her limp had vanished, but her ankles still troubled her at night, and when it was cold and damp, and she was away from the fire, it was worse. You might as well have our warden come and take me back to my cell. The Coyote narrowed his eyes, watching as she crossed the door and jiggled the knob theatrically. playing at? Come back to the table, he said. Do not turn the only pleasant interaction we have into something else to fight over. Please. A bargain or no game, Robin said, holding firm. The coyote sighed. Very well. If you win, I will give you a clue as to the location of that which is so important to you. No, that's not what I said, Robin corrected, kicking back her skirt so she could turn and face him. Damn to all the hells whoever had thought up bustles. I said, I am aware of what you said, he interrupted, watching her intently. And this is what I offer as a compromise. A clue. Nothing more. The scheme just got a longer tail than Robin had hoped for, but she wasn't completely healed yet either. She could afford the time to play it out for a while more. Fine. All right. A clue each time I win? Yes. Agreed. Robin didn't do him the courtesy of offering her hand to shake. She just moved back to the table and sat. The coyote leveled a calculating glance at her, something dangerous lingering in the edges of his mouth. And what do I get if I win? The mischievous smile that spread across his face was wolfish and strangely endearing all at once. Hells, she thought. Didn't think of that, did you, smart-ass? Robin felt the color drain from her face and folded her hands on her lap to keep him from seeing the way they shook. What do you want? The coyote's smile shifted, turning warm, inviting, smoldery. My kiss, he growled softly. Nervous, disbelieving laughter burst out of Robin before she could suck it back. His eyebrows pulled down into a scowl, as though her laughter at his expense was the height of betrayal. She knew he didn't jest, not about that, of course he meant it, but Robin never thought he'd say it out loud, never realized just how absurd it would sound. Is it so little apparent? The coyote murmured, gray eyes flicking up to hers, then dropping to her mouth. I know my methods might not match those you are used to, but I had hoped. Am I so very pathetic in my weakness? Am I so little respected that even the woman I aim to woo has no kind thought for me? Have all the arguments, the beatings, the mistrust I have engendered with my commanders to keep her in civil lodgings and to a fair work schedule meant nothing? Have I protected her from the interest of the general and his men, from the pressures of their torture, from their indecent attentions? For nothing? Robin bristled. Oh, so what? You're saying I have to give in to one kind of unwanted advance to save me from the others? Go throw yourself in a lake, you scrubbed-up asshole. She stomped away from the chess table again, this time with as much force as her ankle would allow. She would give anything to have a knife right now. The thought made her all the more furious because she knew that, even if she'd had one, the coyote still had the physical advantage. He was taller and stronger and could wrest it from her with ease. He'd proven that once already. Skylark, he said sharply, standing, rushing over to her like some pathetic hero in a romantic play. Skylark, wait. Please. That is not what I meant by it. Of course I do not wish to force you, but you must see it. You must see how I admire you. He reached out and took her hands between his, cradling them tenderly. His gaze, when she met it, was unshuttered this time, honest, sincere. He was giving her one of the rare windows where she could see him, the real him. And God damn it all to hells, this was not the moment she wanted to see that. Not now, when she'd made up her mind about being proactive. Well, in case the stupid ghost hair has made you forget, I'm a Sealy, Robin hissed, keeping her voice as low as possible. This won't work. Doesn't matter about any idiotic crush you might have. The coyote's posture changed. He rocked forward slightly, shoulders curled in, eyebrows drawn together, as though her words had caused him physical pain. No longer a Sealy. His normally smooth voice was suddenly low and ragged, wrecked. Not if you wish to stay safe. You told them I'm Bene, and you would be safer still if you were Klonn. He shifted, stepped forward, pulled her towards him until she was nearly flush against him. Then he leaned in and whispered, "It is not too much to ask, is it? Just one kiss." Robin hesitated. "But will it be just a kiss to you?" "I will make it be so," he growled, breath warm against her skin. "That is my deal." "The clues," she chided herself. "Do it for the clues. It's just a kiss. Just one. Don't lose his opportunity over something so small, so stupid. Doesn't matter if it may mean more to him. Just don't let it mean more to you. And for the love of all the gods, don't let him know it'd be your first real one." Okay, yes, I agree," she rasped out. The Coyote's whole countenance transformed for a second time in as many minutes. He released her, stood straight again, chest thrust out, shoulders back. He grinned, and it was like the sun emerging from behind a storm cloud. He held out his hand, all gentlemanly manners once more, and escorted her back to the chess table. He sat and righted the pieces that were knocked over when Robin stomped away. Adrenaline pumped under her skin, although she couldn't say if it was in anticipation of kissing the Coyote or in fear of it. Robin clutched the arms of her chair hard, distracting herself by cataloguing the scratch of the damask against her nails, the fall of the Coyote's dark hair in the lamplight, the details of the lupine faces carved onto the chess pieces, wolf kings and snarling foot soldiers. Robin took a deep breath, calming, centering herself the way she'd been taught. She turned her palms upwards under the table to remind the gods of their own bargain with her, and reached out to move her first piece. The Coyote moved his. Robin narrowed the whole of her focus on the board, eyes darting from piece to piece, calculating, concentrating. In response, the Coyote too leaned forward, attention, intent. A sort of manic gravity fell between them. The only sound was the tick of the clock on the mantel and the soft thunk of the pieces being placed. The game was intense, and Robin was concentrating so hard on trying to anticipate each move the Coyote could possibly make that very soon a headache clanged behind her skull. She pinched the bridge of her nose, and then, miraculously, as if divine light shone upon the board, she saw it. She bit the inside of her lips to keep from gasping in delight, and held her breath. "Don't see it. Don't see it," she prayed. The Coyote reached out and, in all his usual arrogant confidence, played exactly as she hoped he would. He had barely released his knight when she slid her rook forward and crowed, "Checkmate!" The Coyote froze. His gaze skipped over the board, retracing the last few minutes of play, and then he looked up at her, a gasp of shock on his lips. "How did you—" "Just good luck, I guess," Robin said. Then his expression soured, returning once more to the cruel mask of indifference he always wore when he held his emotions secret and close. He crossed his arms, slumping back into the chair. Then he stood, walked over to the mantel, grabbed a crystal decanter of something very green, and poured a finger's width of the liquor into a delicate glass of matching design. He sipped it slowly. Then he turned to face Robin, his expression once more placid, his hands steady. "We made a deal," Robin reminded him softly. He nodded once. "That we did. Very well. Your first clue is south." Robin rolled the clue around in her mind, savored it, peered at it from every angle, but no matter how she contemplated it, it still made no rutting sense. "What the hell's kind of clue is that supposed to be?" she complained. "The only one you will receive." "Tonight," Robin reminded him. "There's always tomorrow." The Coyote's eyes dropped to her mouth again. Yes. Yes, there is." A delicious shiver crawled up Robin's spine, and she wasn't sure if it was fear or desire. Maybe it could be both, she asked herself. The little porcelain clock on the mantelpiece struck 10, and as the last chime died away, the seneschal unlocked the door and stood there in the threshold, waiting. Robin gathered up the confection of her skirts and marched over to take his crooked arm. head held high. South, she repeated to herself all the way back to her room. Once she was locked inside and alone, she retrieved the red lip paint from the vanity drawer and, on the back side of the mirror, wrote down the clue in very small letters. Hopefully, the Coyote was vain enough that the hint was real, and if her luck was returning, he would give her more the next time she won. Eventually, she hoped, they would all make sense, but she would have to win every night to find out.
Give up when you're down. Fly as long as you can.